Good morning, everybody. Working from home today, because I got to take off in a bit anyway. Do some microfilm digging. In the meantime, morning, Chris. Morning, Karen and Denise. Hey, Dina, Timothy, Carol, Jean. Hey, Lisa, Boker Tov. Zekur. Hey, Jennifer, Rebecca, and Martin. It's a mini rant? I don't know. Hey, Todd, hey, Elaine. Hey, Nancy and Karen. Hey, Sue, Christine, Jeff, Paula, Diane. Hey, Grandma Belle. Hey, Mary, Rebecca. It's just very cold out today. Let me see, what are they saying it feels like? Yeah, it's 11 degrees out. Feels like 1. And it feels like -2. But really, I'm just working from home mainly because I have to go out to do some microfilm digging in a couple hours. And I figured I'm only going to go out once today. And the microfilm place doesn't open till noon, so it doesn't make any sense to do a 10 o'clock tour. Hey, Robert. Morning, Wendy. Hey, Arlene and Jerry. Hey, Linda. I should really probably turn this thing around to get the product placement on it. It's cold, but I like the cold. Cold never bothered me anyway. Lynn feels like kind of comes from the wind chill. We're listening to Earl Father Hines live from the Grand Terrace Ballroom on Chicago's Great South Side. Currently a beauty shop, but they still got some of the old murals up. Tomorrow's going to be a colder day. I'll be out on the road some tomorrow. I'm going to go move this curtain a bit. Come on, that's great. It's for a minute, okay? Hey, Lee. Hey, Barbara. I will be outside tomorrow, and I think it might be even colder, but I'll be on the road a bit tomorrow. Give it a couple more minutes for everybody to get on. Just a couple more. Thanks, Lisa. I love this sweater. Oh, look who's here. Hey, Miles. You gonna say hi to all the people? Yeah, I love the bats. Ronnie was complaining yesterday that the fireplace looks so empty. She likes clutter on top of clutter on everything. Welcome along, especially anybody new. Normally I'm out in the field someplace showing off some cool thing in Chicago. Today it's very cold and I have to be out in the afternoon anyway, so. If the place opened at 11, I'd just go out and stay out. If it opens at noon, that's a whole other thing. But alright. Okay. So, here we are then. Okay, so we're going to be talking a bit today. Tonight is the big tour about Johann Hawk, the serial killer from 1905 here in Chicago. I've been putting together the tour all week. I've got a whole lot of new footage, a whole lot of new pictures that most people haven't seen unless they've gone digging around in microfilm reels. Trying to put this guy's story together is a real trick. No two sources gives the same dates for various events. No two sources give the same names to the same people. Various people are known as Mary, Elizabeth, or Anna in different sources. Then the last names are spelled any number of different ways, sometimes wildly different altogether. Like one of the people in one trial transcript, she's called Carolyn Stryker. In the Supreme Court appeal transcript, she's Carolyn Schaefer. Newspapers spelled Stryker more ways than you'd think you could spell the name Stryker, but I have been working very diligently trying to put all this together, trying to get a realistic timeline for the thing, and I've been gathering data about this guy for really a very long time. In fact, last time I was at the Library of Congress, I decided to ask him about their the reel of the New York American. Now, a lot of the good Holmes Hawk stuff was in the Chicago Evening American, which was the William Randolph Hearst paper in Chicago. It was wildly unreliable, but also ridiculously entertaining, and they did have a lot of better pictures. One thing about the really bad tabloidy papers is they did tend to have the most pictures. A lot of these pictures would no longer exist if they had not been in these tabloidy papers. So the New York American was, of course, their New York equivalent. Hawk was captured in New York, so I figured there might be some pretty good stuff there. Turned out there was, too. So here's one for the New York American. Johann Hawk, who is now held captive. The body of Bluebeard's body, but also off to the side there. First of all, there's a picture of him in the bowler hat, doing his best H.H. Holmes impression. We'll get in a bit more of his supposed Holmes connections. But here's this one. Women swear that Hawk was a mesmerist. Boy, did they love to hear that in the newspapers at the time, that he was a hypnotist. Down over here, we can see charmed women by music and bragging of brains. Over to the left here, you can see the 25 times married made love by aid of zither. There's a sex toy you don't hear about very often, the zither. Just move myself up over here. But there's quite a bit of that. It's something we don't really think of anymore, but I noticed there's any number of old newspaper articles where people claim that the zither could hypnotize people. Like 1910s, there were articles about if your daughter went to a Chinese restaurant, they would use a zither to hypnotize her, and next thing you know, she'd be smoking cigarettes and married to a 75-year-old Chinese man. Here's more text. Bodies from alleged wives to be taken from the grave. That I don't know how many times that actually happened. They reported on it happening a lot. That I know of, they only actually exhumed 2 of them. I'm still working on that. And to the left, this woman is sure that Hawk hypnotized her. Yes, Elizabeth Gerke Hawk, that's one of the ones that we can actually confirm that he was married to, that Hawk admitted to himself, had some conversations with her that made it fairly clear. I'm kind of leaning in to read it myself. Couple of pictures of her. We'll see more about her tonight. Hawk was a janitor in the house of murderer Holmes. This was a major angle that came up at the time. It didn't really escape people's notice that the house that he was living in Chicago, his last house in Chicago, was right around the corner from the old Holmes Murder Castle building. And they brought 3 or 4 people into the police station. 3 of them said, yes, I remember this guy. He was definitely around the castle all the time. Their stories didn't really agree. They all had different stories about what his name was and what his job was. And then Dr. Robinson, the only guy that could really be traced to having been at the castle, said no, definitely wasn't him. The best available information is Holmes was not in the United States yet during the time of H.H. Holmes. But you never know. And here is just a random picture of the microfilm machine. When I'm taking pictures of microfilm reels, I separate different articles. These can kind of run together. So in between articles, I'll just take a random picture of the machine or my knees or something so when I'm looking through the files later, I'll know when one article starts and one article ends. Big headline, women swear they were married, Bluebeard wives dead and living. They had a picture of 8 of his wives. And in a few cases, if they hadn't published this in the New York American, this compilation, some of these pictures I don't think I've ever seen anywhere else. On the left is his wife, Anna, who was married to him back in Germany. Then a couple others besides. 5, Julia Steinbrecher. For a while, that was the best version of that I could find. Number 9 over on the left. This isn't a complete catalog of all of them, but a couple of them is the only real photograph of them. Here they are all together, plus a real close-up on Johann's eyes. Now, initially, they charged him only with bigamy because they hadn't figured out they hadn't finished the analysis on the organs that were taken out of a grave here in Chicago yet. And once again, says he hypnotized her. This picture of Hawk is a picture of Schultz, says Mrs. Clank to a correspondent of the American last night. He came to Baltimore early last year. And there are a million stories like this. Women who had married somebody who then quickly deserted them. A lot of them, the hypnosis thing, the real issue here is probably just that they were kind of embarrassed by what had happened, and pretending they had been hypnotized was kind of how they rationalized it. A couple of women did tell him to take a hike. But really, he picked out his type very well. He knew just the kind of people who would be desperate to marry somebody, find out what they want, be that guy for a month. Hawk ridicules charge amidst 2 wives only. Most remarkable prisoner. Microfilm spool. And also, sometimes I'll just find a random thing. This is Governor Pennypacker of Pennsylvania saying hanging is a relic of barbarism. Pennypacker had followed the H.H. Holmes trial really carefully. He attended a day or so of it. It's the copy of Holmes' autobiography that is at the Library of Congress is Pennypacker's own original copy, despite various TV shows saying that it was Holmes' own original copy. There's another good one. Bluebeard Hawk a murderer, says pastor who married him. That's, performed the marriage ceremony. Dr. Reverend Haas. This was a guy who traced Hawk all the way back to early 1895 in Wheeling, West Virginia, just a few months after he first arrived. He had married a woman named, he was operating under the name Jacob Huff. Married a woman, this is the only picture I've seen of her, named Carolyn Hawk. Married her in Wheeling, West Virginia. A couple of months later, she was dead. Reverend Haas eventually had the body exhumed and later claimed that he found that the stomach was missing. And here's Hawk at the train station, surrounded by a cheering crowd. Wherever he went out, the people always would shout. Here's a letter that Reverend Haas had written to Inspector Shippey in Chicago, asking for more information. Better picture of Carolyn. And that's a picture that the Reverend sent over to Germany saying, "Do you know this man? What can you tell me about this man?" And they were able to fill in some of the basics of his biography. He had a wife back in Germany. He had left her and the children to get away from some kind of a swindling or bankruptcy charge. Then Bluebeard then became ghoul at wife's grave. Now, the exhumation made the news in 1898 after the body was dug up. At the time, they said the body was too decomposed to tell and there was full of arsenic from the embalming fluid. But later on, when Haas told the story, he said actually somebody had already dug into the grave and stolen some of the internal organs. Now, the one book that mentions this says that they just left that out in the newspapers because people were so sensitive back then. That's the kind of thing you would see if you have never read articles about grave robbing from the 1800s. They would definitely have talked about that. They talk about it here, in fact. And there's Reverend Haas himself. Now this one, here's a bit more about Mary Gerke. When they found this trunk full of stuff about hypnotism, he said, "Oh, that was my wife, Mary. She wanted me to become a hypnotist so we could make money as fake fortune tellers." And at one point, her story was that when he wouldn't give over all of his money, he said, "Oh yeah, well, I'll just hypnotize you." And she said, "Go ahead, I'll hypnotize you." Now here he is on the train. 2,000 people cheer Hawk. Whenever he went out, the people always shouted. His real name was, in fact, John Jacob Schmidt. So here he is riding back to Chicago aboard a Pullman car on the Nickel Plate Railroad. Now, the woman across from him is Evelyn Campbell. She was a reporter for the Chicago Evening American. Later, under the name Adele Garrison, wrote a domestic serial that ran for about 40 years, but she had accompanied one of Hawk's Chicago wives to New York to identify him, then interviewed him on the train ride all the way back. This is something the New York American drew up. This is a composite. They took all the drawings of Hawk's various wives and drew them into one composite sketch of his basic victim type. There's a picture of Anna Hendrickson, his Chicago wife, who had been brought in, pointing him out. She walked in, and they put out a whole lineup of men. She walked right up to Hawk and said, "Hello, John." And he said, "I'm sorry, Mary." Then shook his head and said, "I don't know who you are." This is the thing about Hawk. Hawk's own statements about his various wives are actually turning out to be a very reliable source. He lied a lot, but he wasn't good at it. It was very, very easy to trip him up. All the ones that he had really married, he'd slip up and admit to sooner or later. The ones that were just been deserted by somebody else that really wasn't him, he was particularly indignant about and was pretty good about sticking to his guns. There's another shot of him riding along with Evelyn Campbell. Hawk admits bigamy, gives advice, marry only one woman at a time. The full quote there is, "I would never say anything against women, but only marry one at a time." Now, his types, Susan asked, what was his type? He didn't really have, they weren't necessarily rich. They were women who maybe had a couple $100s in the bank. But this was all done very quickly, or sometimes he would get them to insure their lives. He didn't really make that much money off of very many of them. He'd get like a $500 life insurance payout. But really, in one case, one of his early ones, it was a woman named Martha Hertzfeld, who had a sister named Augusta. And he said, "Why don't you write your life savings out to your sister Augusta? We'll put it over into her bank account." And then as soon as he got it, he just scratched out the A, and so it said August. And then went with somebody at the bank who said, "Here's my friend August. He would like to deposit this check." And I will point out that, yes, women could get bank accounts. Banks could be as discriminatory as they wanted to up until the 1970s. But you sometimes hear on Twitter that it was illegal for women to have their own bank accounts before the 1970s. It's kind of overstating what the Fair Credit Act did. Here's one more of, when Hawk was captured in New York, he was carrying this fountain pen that was loaded up with arsenic. And Evelyn Campbell asked him about this, and he said, "Oh, that's just headache powder that's in my pen." Which led to the obvious question, who the hell goes around hiding their headache powder in a fountain pen? Pretty good question. That came up at his trial later on. But alright, so that is a run, the best run I could get from the New York American going through their treatment of Hawk. It featured several photographs I had never seen anywhere else. A couple of statements from Hawk that weren't covered anywhere else. Because this was the point, when he was captured in New York was where the reporters were on the ground. Now, the New York World, the big tabloid that was all over the H.H. Holmes case for a while and invented much of what we think about H.H. Holmes today, was really kind of absent from the scene. They had a little bit about Hawk, but not very much. The American loved this story, though. But all right, so that is a quick look at the New York American as a source for Johann Hawk. I'll be doing some of this with the one Chicago paper that I don't have their Hawk coverage on. I'm going to try to get today at a microfilm archive. I'm looking forward. I haven't gotten to do too many microfilm places. I think this place is still using the old school machines too. Like, I know the Harold Washington Library has switched to the more modern computerized microfilm readers, but the thing is, those are slow. It's like working on Windows 95 using those things. I'll just take the old manual clunky ones that never exactly work any day. And as you can see, my method is really just to take a whole bunch of pictures of the screen and then organize them later on. But all right, everybody, so we have got a lot of stuff coming up. There will be a full-length tour, a full presentation on the life and career of Johann Hawk coming up tonight. That'll be at 8 o'clock right here on Mysterious Chicago. Tomorrow morning will be Find a Grave Friday. I haven't even thought about where I'm going for Find a Grave Friday. No, wait, I know kind of where I'm going for that. So yeah, lots of good stuff coming up, so thanks a lot everybody for joining me. I'll let you know how things went in the microfilm room tonight. There might even be some new additions into the tour deck tonight. And in any case, until then everybody, stay safe, stay strong, and stay away from matrimonial agencies, whatever you do. But of course, most of all, everybody, stay spooky. Have a great day.